Over the course of the last decade, we have really seen R-rated films take off and make and break some films. Deadpool and Logan found plenty of success. Hellboy did not. But that's also because it was Hellboy and not a continuation of Del Toro's. But hey, let's not hang too much on that. Let's talk about James Mangold, the man who directed Logan. He wants to talk about the R approach to films. So I think we can all agree that not every movie, specifically ones based on comics, should be R-rated. I think that much is clear. I know there's definitely a percentage of fans that believe every single comic book film should be R-rated and dark, and that's the way to make them adult. You've probably seen people argue that Captain America would be far better if it was an R-rated film that was ridiculously filled with blood and murder. Why? I don't know. Now, obviously, on the other side of that, you also have the other argument where I say you don't need to make everything R-rated, but some things definitely should be. There's certain characters that just fit into that mold that if you take that away, you're taking away a giant part of that character. One of these is Wolverine, and another one is Deadpool. When they finally went R-rated with Wolverine, we got something very special. So again, he fits that mold. Now recently, Mangold, who of course directed Logan, was part of a watch party, and he talked about the R-rated approach and why it offered him more freedom. Now he did also say that the R-rated approach also limited him because he had to make a trade. He could have a higher budget if the film was not R-rated, or a smaller budget but an R rating. And he says it worked in his favor because he wanted to use that R rating to deliver more emotional story beats and not just focus on heavier CG elements with a lower rating. And I think pretty much anybody that's loved Logan, like us here at the CBC, will agree that was the correct pick. And here's an interesting quote he had, and I quote, "When you make an R-rated film, the film is no longer marketed to 9-year-olds. And when the film is no longer marketed to 9 or 10-year-old kids, there's other changes that happen behind the scenes. The studio no longer anticipates that the film will play for families, because the studio no longer anticipates the film will play as a family film. There are narrative burdens that are no longer upon the movie that are far different than just where's the language or sexuality or violence." And he also does add a little bit more, talking about how certain scenes are allowed to play longer. You can have bigger pauses. You're allowed to kind of sit there and sit for a moment and let the characters absorb the scene and everything, where if you're in a faster moving film, a film that has to get to these explosive moments, you're really technically not allowed that because they're expecting families to go in with young children and they have to be, kind of fed to, if you will, because they need fast moving pictures, explosions and all that. So again, he kind of addresses it like a Bugs Bunny cartoon when you're making films that aren't exactly the way he intended it to. And honestly, yeah, I agree with him. Logan needed the rating it got. If that film would have been PG-13, I don't think it would have been as successful because it would be a different film.